Kneel before me, you slave!
Sir, I am not a slave.
Where is the fucking manager of this place?
I'll never forget the moment Vincent Marcello walked into my McDonald's at 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before closing. 6 men in $1,000 suits moving like predators. The entire restaurant went silent. You could hear the pop music playing overhead, suddenly grotesque in its cheerfulness. Then my manager grabbed my arm, trembling. "Table 7. Now he asked for you. By name." My blood turned to ice. How did the city's most dangerous mafia boss know my name? I walked to that booth like I was walking to my execution. Vincent Marcello looked up with dead shark eyes, a lightning bolt scar slicing down his cheek. "Jasmine," he said, smooth as poison. "I've been watching you." What he demanded next should have destroyed me. Should have broken me. Should have made me disappear like all the others. But he didn't know who he was dealing with. And what I said back changed both our lives forever. Before we start, I need to tell you something that breaks my heart. Our original channel, 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears, was deleted by YouTube without warning. 200,000 of you, gone in an instant. Every story we crafted, every emotion we shared, every connection we built, erased overnight. We're starting over from zero. And we need you now more than ever. If you've ever felt powerless, if you've ever had something precious taken from you, you'll understand what we're going through. This story you're about to hear, about standing up when the world tries to knock you down, that's us right now. Hit subscribe. Please. It's the only way we survive this. It's the only way these stories keep reaching people who need them. We lost everything once. Don't let us lose you too. Now let me tell you about Jasmine. 3 months. That's how long I'd been wearing this polyester uniform that smelled permanently of grease no matter how many times I washed it. 3 months since I'd walked out of St. Mary's School of Nursing with my head down and my dreams in pieces. The letter still burned in my memory. "Due to insufficient funds, your enrollment has been terminated." 12 words that killed everything I'd worked for since I was 16 years old. My mother had cried that night, not the loud, dramatic kind of crying, but the quiet, soul-crushing kind that's somehow worse. The kind that says she'd failed me when really, it was the system that had failed us both. Now here I was, 23 years old, asking strangers if they wanted to supersize their meals. Every "would you like fries with that?" felt like swallowing glass. Every customer who snapped their fingers at me or complained about pickles was a reminder of how far I'd fallen. But what choice did I have? Mama's hospital shifts barely covered rent. My little brother needed new shoes. Pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. Or so I thought. The thing about rock bottom is that you start to believe you belong there. You start to think that maybe this is all you deserve. The aching feet, the condescending looks, the way people's eyes slide right past you like you're invisible. You start to forget that you once had dreams bigger than a drive-through window. But some lessons don't come gentle. Some lessons arrive at 11:47 p.m. in a $1,000 suit with dead eyes and a demand that should have broken me. Have you ever had to choose between your dignity and your survival? Because that night I learned they're not always the same thing. The real question is, when that moment comes for you, which one will you choose? Derek's hand on my arm felt like ice. My manager had never touched me before. We weren't that kind of workplace. But his fingers dug into my uniform sleeve with the desperate grip of a drowning man reaching for anything solid. "Table 7, he whispered again, and I could smell the fear on him. "Sour. Sure." "He asked for you by name, Jasmine." "How does Vincent Marcello know your name?" The question hit me like a freight train. Vincent Marcello. Everyone in our neighborhood knew that name. The man who controlled the docks, the unions, the politicians who were supposed to protect us but never did. The man whose enemies disappeared into the river. The man mothers whispered about to keep their sons off corners after dark. And he knew my name. My mind raced through every interaction, every customer, every face that had passed through this restaurant in 3 months. Had I served him before? Had I done something wrong? Had I accidentally looked at someone I shouldn't have looked at, said something I shouldn't have said? "I don't know," I managed to choke out. "Derek, I swear I don't know." He released my arm, stepping back. I saw it in his eyes, the calculation. The moment he decided that whatever was about to happen to me, he wanted no part of it. That's what fear does. It makes people abandon each other. The walk from the counter to table 7 felt like walking through water. Everything slowed down. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter, harsher. The smell of French fries turned my stomach. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears, drowning out the tinny pop music still playing overhead. Mama's voice echoed in my head, the same words she told me every morning before school since I was 5 years old. You hold your head up, girl. We didn't survive everything we survived for you to bow to anyone. But Mama had never met Vincent Marcello. What would you do if the most dangerous man in your city called you by name? Would you run? Would you pretend you didn't hear? Or would you walk toward your fate the way I did, one trembling step at a time? Because something told me that running would only make things worse. He was younger than I expected. Maybe 40, with salt and pepper hair slicked back like he just stepped out of an old movie. The kind of movie where men like him always win and girls like me always lose. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Dead eyes. Shark eyes. Dark and calculating, measuring me like I was a problem to be solved or a thing to be used. A scar ran down his left cheek, not the kind you get from an accident. This was deliberate. A knife dragged slowly through flesh, leaving a mark like frozen lightning. Jasmine Hartford. His voice was smooth, cultured. He said my full name like he'd practiced it. Like he'd been thinking about this moment. Sit down. It wasn't a request. I remained standing, order pad clutched in my shaking hand. What can I get you, sir? One of his men, a bull-necked guy with cauliflower ears, started to rise from his seat. But Marcello held up one finger and the man froze. That's power. The kind that doesn't need to be loud. You know what I like about this city? Marcello leaned back, his suit probably worth more than my mother's car. It has order. Structure. Everyone knows their place. The strong command. The weak serve. It's natural. It's how things have always been. Every word felt like a weight being placed on my chest. I knew where this was going. I'd heard these words before, different mouths, different contexts, but always the same poison underneath. Some people, he continued, his dead eyes never leaving mine, are born to lead, born to power. And others... He gestured lazily at my uniform, at the grease stains I could never quite wash out, at the name tag pinned crooked on my chest. Others are born to serve. You understand? Oh, I understood. I'd understood my whole life. Every time a teacher called on the kid next to me instead. Every time a store clerk followed me down the aisle. Every time someone clutched their purse tighter when I walked by. Every time someone looked at my skin and decided they already knew everything about me. I'd like to order, he said, and his voice dropped lower, more dangerous. But first, I need you to understand your place. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the music seemed to fade. I need you to kneel. Have you ever felt your entire world crack open? Have you ever stood at the edge of a moment that you know will define everything that comes after? Because I was about to make a choice that would change both our lives forever. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Someone's phone dinged in the silence. But Vincent Marcello's face remained perfectly still, perfectly serious. Excuse me? My voice came out steadier than I felt. You heard me. He gestured lazily at the floor beside his booth, like he was asking me to pick up a dropped napkin. Kneel. Like the servant you are. Like your ancestors did. It's in your blood, isn't it? To kneel before your betters? The words detonated in my chest like a bomb. One of his men laughed, a cruel barking sound that echoed off the walls. Derek was frozen behind the counter, his face drained of all color. The few remaining customers stared with that horrible fascination people have for atrocities they're relieved aren't happening to them. Like watching a car crash. Like watching someone else's life end. It's simple, Marcello continued, and I could hear the smile in his voice even though his face remained cold. You kneel, show proper respect, and then I order. We all go home. Or... He let the word hang in the air like a noose. Or you refuse and we find out what happens to people who don't know their place. His men shifted in their seats. Hands moved toward jacket pockets. I knew what was in those pockets. Everyone knew. Is this what my great-grandmother felt, I wondered, when she was forced to step off the sidewalk so white folks could pass? Is this what my grandfather felt in Selma, when dogs and fire hoses were turned on him for daring to ask for the right to vote? Like your ancestors, he repeated, and the words were designed to cut. Designed to remind me of every chain, every whip, every knee forced into dirt and blood and humiliation. It's what you people do, isn't it? You people. 2 words. 2 words that tried to reduce me to nothing. 2 words that tried to erase my mother's nursing degree, my grandmother's teaching career, my great-grandmother's secret literacy, my grandfather's courage. 2 words that tried to make me believe I was less than human. The thing about humiliation is that it requires your participation. Someone can try to humiliate you, but they can't succeed unless some part of you believes they're right. And suddenly, standing there in that McDonald's that smelled of French fries and broken dreams, I realized something. I didn't believe it. Not anymore. Would you kneel to save your own life? Would you swallow that poison to see another day? Or would you stand and risk everything? Because what I was about to do would either save my soul or end my life. Maybe both. In that moment between his demand and my response, time fractured. I wasn't just standing in a McDonald's anymore. I was standing on the shoulders of giants. I saw my great-grandmother, Ruthie Mae, who'd picked cotton in Mississippi until her hands bled and her back bent. But every night, by stolen candlelight, she taught herself to read from a Bible she'd hidden in her skirt. When the overseer caught her, he burned the Bible. So she memorized it. Every word. Every verse. You can burn a book, but you can't burn what lives in someone's mind. I saw my grandfather, James Hartford, marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. The photographs don't show his face. He's just another young man in the crowd, but Mama said he walked at the front. When the tear gas came, when the clubs fell, he covered a child with his body and took the beating meant for her. He carried those scars until the day he died, and never once called them anything but badges of honor. I saw my grandmother, Patricia, walking into an all-white school in 1962 while grown adults threw rocks and screamed words no child should ever hear. She graduated top of her class, became a teacher, taught for 40 years, and never, not once, told any of her students to be small, to be quiet, to know their place. I saw my mother, Linda, working 3 jobs after my father died. Cleaning houses in the morning, stocking shelves at night, and somehow still showing up to every parent-teacher conference with her head held high and her dignity intact. Never complaining. Never breaking. Just surviving with a grace that looked like it cost nothing but really cost everything. These weren't just stories. They were my inheritance. Their strength was my blood. Their refusal to break was my backbone. Well? Marcelo's voice cut through my thoughts. I'm waiting. Or maybe you need help understanding. He snapped his fingers at one of his men. Maybe we need to make this clearer. No. The word came out of my mouth before I'd even decided to say it. It hung in the air like a gunshot, like a declaration of war. His smile disappeared. The temperature in the restaurant dropped 10 degrees. What did you say? My grandmother used to tell me about the moment she decided to walk into that school. She said she was terrified, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. But then she remembered something her own mother had told her. Fear and courage aren't opposites. Courage is just fear that prayed first and decided to move forward anyway. I looked Vincent Marcello dead in his shark eyes. I said no. My voice was stronger now. I could feel my ancestors standing behind me, their hands on my shoulders, holding me up. I don't kneel for anyone. Not for you. Not for anyone. Can you imagine carrying the weight of everyone who came before you? Can you imagine feeling their strength pouring into you like electricity, like fire, like something holy? Because in that moment, I wasn't alone. I was never alone. And Vincent Marcello was about to learn what happens when you try to break someone who's already been forged in fire. Vincent Marcello stood slowly. He was taller than I'd realized, easily 6'3", maybe more. His men tensed immediately, hands sliding inside their jackets where I knew guns waited. The restaurant held its breath. This was it. This was how I died. Over minimum wage and my pride. Over refusing to bend my knee to a man who thought my skin made me his property. Do you know what I can do to you? His voice was silk over steel, smooth and deadly. He took a step closer and I could smell his cologne, expensive, overpowering. I can make you disappear. I can make it so no one even remembers your name. Your mother, Linda, isn't it? Works at St. Catherine's Hospital. Night shift. Walks to her car alone at 7 a.m. every morning. My heart stopped. The world tilted. He'd done his homework. He knew where Mama worked. Knew her schedule. Knew when she was most vulnerable. I could have someone waiting for her, he continued, his voice almost gentle now, like he was doing me a favor by explaining. In the parking garage. Level 3 where she always parks. It would look like a robbery. These things happen in this city. Tragic. But so common that no one even investigates properly. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my order pad. It clattered on the floor, obscenely loud. Derek had his phone out, probably calling 911, but we both knew the police wouldn't arrive in time. They never did in our neighborhood. Not for people who looked like me. So I'll ask you one more time, Jasmine Hartford. Marcelo's face was inches from mine now. I could see the pores in his skin, the gray hairs mixed with black, the absolute certainty in his eyes that he'd already won. Kneel. Or everyone you love pays the price for your pride. What would you do? If someone threatened your mother, would you sacrifice your dignity to save her? Is your soul worth less than someone else's safety? I thought about Mama. About the way she hummed while she cooked breakfast on her rare days off. About the way she still checked on me every night before she left for her shift, even though I was 23 years old. About the way she'd cried silently that night I dropped out of nursing school, like her heart was breaking for dreams that weren't even her own. I could kneel. I could save her. I could swallow this humiliation and let it poison me from the inside out for the rest of my life. Then you'd be exactly what my mother always warned me about, I heard myself say. My voice was shaking but the words came out clear. The thing that makes people kneel out of fear instead of respect. The thing that has power but no honor. No humanity. Just violence and threats against women who walk to their cars in the morning. I stepped closer to him. I don't know where I found the courage. Maybe it wasn't courage at all. Maybe it was just the realization that some humiliations you don't survive, even if your body keeps breathing. You want me to kneel? My voice rose. Every person in that restaurant could hear me now. Congratulations. You've terrorized a woman making $9.50 an hour. You've threatened a nursing student who had to drop out because she couldn't afford tuition. You've made 6 grown men with guns intimidate someone half your size. You must be so proud. Derek had gone completely white. One of the customers, a middle-aged white woman, had her phone up, filming. Good. Let the world see this. But let me tell you what real power looks like, I continued, and now my voice was shaking not from fear but from rage. From righteousness. From every indignity I'd ever swallowed. Real power is my mother, who raises 2 kids alone and never complains. Real power is my grandmother, who walked into a school while people threw rocks at her and graduated top of her class. Real power is standing here, knowing you could destroy me and refusing to kneel anyway. I spread my arms wide, exposing myself, making myself vulnerable in the most complete way possible. So go ahead. Do whatever you're going to do. But I will not kneel. Not for you. Not for anyone. Because the moment I kneel, you haven't just won. You've made me betray every person who fought so I wouldn't have to. The silence was absolute. Even Marcelo's men looked uncertain now. What happened next would either be my death or my salvation. But at least I would die standing up. The silence stretched. 1 second. 5. 10. I counted my own heartbeats, wondering which one would be my last. Then Vincent Marcelo did something I never expected. He laughed. Not the cruel laugh from before. This was different, genuine, almost shocked. Like I'd just told him a joke he didn't know he needed to hear. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, really seeing me, not just the uniform or the skin color or the assumptions he'd walked in with. You know why I'm here, Jasmine? He sat back down, the tension draining from the room like air from a punctured balloon. His men looked confused but lowered their hands from their jackets. 3 weeks ago, someone robbed one of my businesses. Took $50,000 from a safe in my office. Security cameras showed a young black woman, your height, your build. My men wanted to come for you immediately. My stomach dropped into my feet. A robbery. Mistaken identity. All of this, the threats, the humiliation, the demand to kneel, because someone who looked vaguely like me had stolen from him. But I watched the footage again. And again. He pulled out his phone, held it up. The video showed a woman in a hoodie, face partially obscured. She was my height, my build, but that was where the resemblance ended. Different walk. Different posture. Different everything except the color of our skin. It wasn't you. Different gait, different mannerisms. But I needed to be sure. I needed to see what you were made of. He leaned forward, and for the first time, I saw something almost human in those shark eyes. The woman who robbed me? When we found her, she ran. She groveled. She cried. She offered me everything. Money she didn't have, information about others, even her own sister, to save herself. She had no spine. No dignity. Just fear. He gestured at me, and there was something like respect in the movement. But you? You stood there knowing I could kill you, knowing I could hurt everyone you love, and you still refused to kneel. You defined power in a way I hadn't heard in 20 years. You made me remember something I'd forgotten. What? My voice came out as a whisper. That we all looked the same to you? Something flickered across his face. Not quite shame. But close. Would you forgive someone who profiled you, threatened you, tried to humiliate you just because they admitted they were wrong? Or does the wound cut too deep for forgiveness? My father came to this country with nothing, Marcelo said slowly, and for the first time, his voice had an emotion other than cold calculation. He was Italian. Immigrant. They spit on him. Called him slurs. Treated him like dirt. He clawed his way up through blood and violence because that was the only language this country spoke to people like us. He paused. I learned early that respect isn't given. It's taken. At gunpoint if necessary. People like you, I said, my voice hard despite my shaking hands, have power, money, and fear. People like me have to earn respect every single day while starting from behind the line. We're not the same. He studied me for a long moment. The restaurant was so quiet I could hear the ice machine cycling in the back. You're right, he said finally. We're not the same. What I took by force you earned by standing. That's the difference. He reached into his jacket. Every muscle in my body tensed again, but he pulled out a business card and a check. He slid them across the table. There's a scholarship program. 4 nursing students. Full tuition, living expenses, stipend for books. It's funded anonymously by me. I'll make sure you get it. He tapped the check. This covers what you owe the school. Consider it an apology for making assumptions based on. He gestured vaguely. Surface appearances. I stared at the check. The amount made my head spin. It was enough. Enough to go back to school. Enough to stop my mother from working 3 jobs. Enough to change everything. I don't want your guilt money, I said, even though every cell in my body was screaming at me to take it. It's not guilt. He stood, buttoning his jacket. It's respect. Real respect. The kind you can't take at gunpoint. He headed for the door, then turned back. You were right, you know. About power. Real power isn't making people kneel. It's standing tall when someone tries to make you bow. I'd forgotten that. Thank you for reminding me. Can someone who tried to break you also be the one who lifts you up? Can an act of prejudice transform into an act of redemption? I didn't have the answer. I'm still not sure I do. They left as silently as they'd arrived. The door chimed cheerfully behind them, obscene in its normalcy. For a moment, the restaurant remained frozen. Everyone holding their breath, waiting to see if this was real or if Marcelo would come back through those doors with different intentions. Derek rushed over, his phone still shaking in his hand. Jasmine, oh my God, I called 911, they're on their way, we need to report this, corporate needs to know, we should close early, are you okay, what just? But I barely heard him. I was staring at the check in my trembling hands. The amount seemed impossible. More money than I'd seen in my entire life. Next to it, the business card was simple, elegant, Hartford Nursing Scholarship Fund. Hartford. My last name. He'd named it after me. My phone buzzed. Mama, how's work, baby? Remember? I finished the text in my head before I read it. You keep your head up. I kept my head up, Mama. Just like you taught me. The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 officers, both white, both looking bored until Derek mentioned Vincent Marcello's name. Then they got interested. They asked questions, took statements, looked at the video the customer had filmed on her phone. They asked me if I wanted to press charges for harassment, intimidation, terroristic threats. I looked at the check again. At the scholarship card. At the path back to my dreams laid out in front of me like a bridge across an impossible chasm. No, I said. Nothing happened. He was just testing me. And I passed. The officers exchanged glances. They didn't believe me, but they also didn't care enough to push. People like me didn't press charges against people like Marcello. Not in this city. Not anywhere. After they left, I stood at the window and looked at my reflection in the dark glass. A young black woman in a McDonald's uniform who just stared down one of the most dangerous men in the city and somehow walked away not just alive but victorious. But was it victory? Or was it something more complicated? Here's what kept me awake that night. Marcello had profiled me. Had assumed I was a criminal because a criminal shared my skin color. Had threatened my mother. Had demanded I humiliate myself. Had used every tool of systemic oppression and personal violence at his disposal. And then he'd apologized with money. Was that justice? Was that redemption? Or was it just another form of power? The power to hurt and then the power to heal, all on his terms, all according to his timeline? I didn't know. I still don't. What I did know was this: my mother needed help. I needed an education. And sometimes survival means accepting imperfect solutions from imperfect people in an imperfect world. The next morning, I went to St. Catherine's Hospital during Mama's break. I found her in the cafeteria, eating a sandwich that looked like it had been made 3 days ago, her scrubs wrinkled from a 12-hour shift. Mama, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. I'm going back to school. She looked up, and I saw hope flicker in her tired eyes before she pushed it down. She'd learned not to hope too hard. Hope hurt when it died. Baby, we talked about this. The money is handled. I slid the scholarship information across the table. I got a full scholarship. Everything covered. Books, tuition, living expenses. Everything. She read it slowly, her lips moving. Then she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. How? How do you explain to your mother that you earned your future by refusing to kneel? How do you explain that the most dangerous man in the city tested you and you passed? How do you explain that sometimes grace comes from the most unlikely sources? I kept my head up, I said simply. Just like you taught me. She came around the table and hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe. And for the first time in 3 months I let myself cry. What would you have done? Would you have taken the scholarship? Or would the source of it poison everything that came after? Because I took it. And I'd do it again. 3 months later, I walked back through the doors of St. Mary's School of Nursing. The admissions officer who'd sent my termination letter couldn't quite meet my eyes as she processed my re-enrollment. The Hartford Nursing Scholarship Fund was generous, prestigious, and completely anonymous. No one questioned it. No one looked too deep. Maybe they didn't want to know. I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. Every exam, every clinical rotation, every late night studying was fueled by the memory of that moment in McDonald's. By the choice I'd made. By the price I'd refused to pay. The other students were mostly white, mostly from families with money. They wore designer scrubs and carried the latest tablets. They talked about their parents' medical practices and family connections. And sometimes when I walked into a room, the conversation would pause. That invisible wall would go up. But I kept my head up. I graduated 2 years later, top of my class. Mama sat in the front row, crying proud tears in her best dress. My little brother held up a sign that said, "That's my sister." And somewhere in my heart, I felt my grandmother and great-grandmother and grandfather watching, their hands still on my shoulders. I never saw Vincent Marcello again. But I heard about him. 6 months after that night in McDonald's, he was arrested, brought down by a coalition of federal agencies who'd been building a case for years. The news reports were brutal. Racketeering, money laundering, murder. They gave him 25 years. Some people said he'd gotten sloppy, careless, that he'd made mistakes that a man like him shouldn't make. I think something else happened. I think that night in McDonald's when a terrified server refused to kneel, something in him cracked. Maybe he remembered what it felt like to be human. Maybe he remembered his father, spit on and humiliated, clawing his way up through violence because that was the only language available to him. Maybe, just for a moment, he'd seen another path. And maybe that moment of weakness or strength, depending on how you looked at it, was enough to bring his entire empire down. I don't know. I'll never know. What I do know is this. 5 years after that night, I work as a nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital. Same hospital as my mother. We share the same break room, the same cafeteria with the terrible sandwiches, the same parking garage where I once thought someone might be waiting for her. I specialize in emergency care. I treat everyone who comes through those doors, gang members and cops, rich and poor, white and black and brown and everything in between. I treat them with dignity. I treat them with respect. And I never, not once, ask anyone to kneel. Because that night in a McDonald's that smelled like French fries and broken dreams, I learned something that changed me forever. True power isn't in making others small. It's in refusing to be diminished, even when the cost might be everything. Especially then. Sometimes people ask me if I regret taking the scholarship. If I feel compromised taking money from a man who profiled me, threatened me, tried to break me. The answer is complicated. Yes, I took his money. Yes, I used it to build my life. But I didn't take it on my knees. I took it standing up, with my dignity intact, with my ancestors proud, with my head held high. And that makes all the difference. If you're facing your own Vincent Marcello, whoever or whatever tries to make you small, to make you kneel, to make you forget who you are and where you come from, remember this. You have a choice. You always have a choice. The choice isn't always easy. It might cost you everything. Might save you. But the choice to stand, to refuse diminishment, to keep your head up even when it feels impossible, that choice is yours. No one can take it from you unless you give it away. My name is Jasmine Hartford. I'm a registered nurse. I work at St. Catherine's Hospital in the emergency department. And I have never knelt for anyone. Not once. Not ever. Would you? So Jasmine kept her head up. She refused to kneel. She rebuilt her life from nothing. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. YouTube took our channel, our home of 5 years, 200,000 subscribers, millions of people we reached with stories like this. Gone. No explanation. No second chance. Except this one. If Jasmine's story moved you, if you felt her pain, her strength, her triumph, then you understand what we're fighting for. The right to exist. The right to share these stories. The right to rebuild. Subscribe. Hit that like button. Share this video. It's not just supporting us, it's standing up against injustice. It's saying that voices like ours deserve to be heard. We gave you Jasmine's story. Now we're asking, will you be part of ours? Don't scroll past. Subscribe now. Help us rise from the ashes. We're not giving up. Please don't give up on us.